The crimson light of the emergency klaxons bathed the bridge of the UES Vanguard in an eerie glow as Captain Mara Lynn gripped the command rail, her knuckles white. On the main view screen, the holographic face of Warlord Zelar Thune, all sharp angles and predatory eyes, loomed larger than life. His voice, a rasp that seemed to scrape against the very air of the bridge, filled the silence. Your colonies on the rim will surrender their helium-3 refineries and deuterium harvesting rights to the Zelthian Empire within 1 standard week, he said, mandibles clicking in what the crew had come to recognize as amusement. Or we will demonstrate the futility of resistance on a scale your precious council cannot ignore. Mara's jaw tightened. The Council of Worlds has already proposed fair trade agreements for those resources. Warlord, there's no need for threats. Fair? Zelar's multifaceted eyes glittered. Your species spreads like a plague, terraforming and mining and colonizing without regard for the greater balance. The Zelthian Empire has tolerated your expansion long enough. We do not threaten, Captain Lynn. We promise. The transmission cut abruptly, leaving only the soft beeping of the bridge consoles and the heavy breathing of her crew. He's broadcasting this ultimatum across all human frequencies, Lieutenant Kara Chen reported, fingers dancing across her communications panel. Every settlement from Earth to the rim is receiving it. It's a declaration of war, Tactical Officer Wei muttered. Mara straightened her back. No, Lieutenant. It's an invitation to one. She turned to her XO. Commander Moreno, set course for the Vega transit point. We need to alert the Council. Jax Moreno nodded, his dark eyes troubled. The nearest jump point is through the Ceres asteroid field. It'll be tight navigation. We don't have a choice, Mara replied, settling into her command chair. The Zelthians just put a deadline on humanity's future, and I intend to make sure we have one. As the Vanguard's engines hummed to life, Mara couldn't shake the sensation that they were crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. After decades of tense border encounters and diplomatic doublespeak, the fragile peace between humanity and the Zelthian Empire was about to shatter, and the sound it would make would echo across the stars. The Vanguard slipped into the chaotic embrace of the Ceres asteroid field, navigational deflectors straining against the constant barrage of space debris. On the bridge, tension hung thick in the recycled air. Maintain course. Helm. Steady as she goes, Mara commanded, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The asteroid field stretched before them, like a labyrinth of stone and ice, a natural defensive barrier they needed to traverse to reach the jump point beyond. Captain, called XO Moreno from his station, voice tight with concern. Long-range sensors are picking up energy signatures consistent with Zelthian interceptors, 3 vessels, closing from the port quadrant. Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. They're cutting us off from the jump point. Tactical analysis? Lieutenant Wei's fingers flew across his console. Mantis-class interceptors. Captain. Fast, maneuverable, but lightly armored. Their beam weapons will have difficulty penetrating our shields at full strength. But if all 3 concentrate fire, we won't give them the chance, Mara decided. Helm, take us deeper into the field. Navigator Sato turned with alarm clear on her face. Captain, the gravitational instabilities increase exponentially as we... I'm aware of the risks. Lieutenant, execute. The Vanguard banked sharply, diving toward a dense cluster of asteroids, where radiation from nearby solar flares had created a sensor-dampening field. The maneuver sent crew members grabbing for handholds as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. Zelthian vessels in pursuit, Moreno reported. They're splitting formation to box us in. Predictable, Mara muttered. Cut main engines. Switch to maneuvering thrusters only. Captain, Sato questioned, even as her hands complied with the order. Mara leaned forward. The Zelthians rely heavily on heat signatures for tracking in asteroid fields. Let's give them something to chase. Understanding dawned in Moreno's eyes. Tactical, Prepare 2 Class 3 mining charges. Set them for proximity detonation. Wei nodded. Charges ready, Commander. Deploy and continue on minimal power, Mara ordered. Let's disappear. The mining charges, ordinarily used for breaking up asteroids for resource extraction, drifted away from the Vanguard, their propulsion systems mimicking the heat signature of a fleeing vessel. Meanwhile, the Vanguard itself powered down to minimal life support, the great ship seeming to hold its breath as it drifted in the shadow of a massive, slowly rotating asteroid. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited. The bridge crew watched their displays in silence until a series of flashes lit up the darkness outside. The Zelthian interceptors had taken the bait, pursuing and firing upon the decoys. The resulting explosion, as the charges detonated, sent a cascading wave of debris through the field, temporarily blinding enemy sensors and creating a temporary safe corridor. Power up and punch through, Mara commanded. Maximum acceleration once we clear the field. The Vanguard surged forward, engines roaring back to life as it shot through the corridor of destruction, emerging from the asteroid field just as the Zelthian vessels regrouped behind them. They're in pursuit, Captain, Wei warned. Weapons charging. Distance to jump point? 3 minutes at current speed, Sato replied. Mara's eyes narrowed. Reroute auxiliary power to the shields. Prepare to... The ship lurched violently as a particle beam sliced across their aft section. Direct hit to port nacelle, Moreno reported, his voice steady despite the alarms blaring around them. Shield integrity at 74%. Return fire. Defensive pattern delta, Mara ordered. We just need to hold them off long enough to make the jump. The Vanguard's aft cannons unleashed a barrage of superheated plasma, forcing the pursuing Zelthian ships to break formation. One interceptor, caught in the broadside, spun away trailing debris from a damaged wing. 2 minutes to jump point, Sato called out. Another hit rocked the ship. Console panels sparked on the bridge's starboard side, sending a technician tumbling to the deck. Shields at 58%, Wei updated. They're coordinating their attack runs now. Mara tapped her command console. Engineering. This is the captain. We need more power to the engines. The gruff voice of Chief Engineer Rodriguez answered through the comm. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. Push any harder and we'll blow the containment field. 1 minute, 30 seconds to jump point, Sato announced, tension evident in her voice. Mara made a split-second decision. Tactical. Release the emergency coolant into our wake. Moreno looked up sharply. Captain, that will leave us without emergency cooling systems for the reactor. If we don't make this jump, Commander, we won't need them, Mara countered. Do it. Y executed the command. Behind the Vanguard, a cloud of supercooled particles billowed out, flash freezing in the vacuum of space and creating a dense fog of ice crystals. The pursuing Zelthian vessels plunged into the cloud, their sensors momentarily blinded. 1 minute to jump point, Sato called. They're breaking through the cloud, Wei warned. Interceptors realigning for final approach. Mara could almost feel the Zelthian weapons locking onto their vulnerable engines. Divert all remaining non-essential power to shields. Brace for impact. The ship shuddered as another volley struck home, but the reinforced shields held, barely. 30 seconds to jump point. 20. Jump drives, spooling up. Incoming fire, Wei shouted. Evasive maneuvers, Mara commanded, but she knew they wouldn't be quick enough. Just as the energy signatures of the Zelthian weapons peaked, indicating an imminent barrage that would likely cripple the Vanguard, the fabric of space before them seemed to ripple and tear. Jump point activating, Sato exclaimed. With a flash of actinic light and a bone-deep shudder that ran through the ship's superstructure, the UES Vanguard slipped into the artificial wormhole of the jump point, leaving their pursuers behind in normal space. As the violent transition of faster-than-light travel subsided, the bridge fell silent except for the beeping of damage control alerts. We've cleared the jump, Moreno confirmed. Setting course for Earth. Mara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well done, everyone. She rose from her chair, surveying the bridge, damaged but intact, like her crew. This is just the beginning. When we reach Earth, the real fight starts. The grand amphitheater of the Council of Worlds hummed with tension. Representatives from each of humanity's colony systems filled the tiered seating, their faces grave as they watched the recording of Warlord Zellar's ultimatum for the third time. Captain Mara Lynn stood at attention beside the central podium, the formal dress uniform of the United Earth Space Force feeling unnaturally stiff after weeks in standard shipboard attire. The bandage on her temple from the Vanguard's narrow escape was hidden beneath her regulation cap, but the bruises on her soul from the loss of 2 crew members during their flight were not so easily concealed. High Counselor Diaz raised a hand, and the recording froze on Zellar's alien visage. Mandibles spread in what xenobiologists had identified as a gesture of dominance. "Captain Lynn," Diaz began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "Your ship was the first to encounter this declaration. What is your assessment of the Zelthian intent?" Mara stepped forward. "High Counselor, members of the Council, I believe Warlord Zellar's message is clear. This is not a negotiating position. It is an ultimatum backed by the full might of the Zelthian military. The Empire has been expanding aggressively for decades, and they view our resource-rich colonies as both a threat and an opportunity." "An opportunity for what, exactly?" asked Counselor Mbeki of the African Collective, his deep voice resonant with skepticism. "For total dominance of the sector," Mara replied without hesitation. "Intelligence reports indicate the Zelthian civilization is facing resource constraints within their own systems. They need our helium-3 and deuterium reserves, not just for expansion, but for survival." A murmur swept through the assembly. Ambassador Rain Ives rose from her seat among the diplomatic corps, her silver hair gleaming under the chamber lights. "Captain Lynn's assessment aligns with our intelligence," she confirmed. "However, I would caution against assuming that military confrontation is inevitable. The Zelthian Empire has engaged in similar posturing before, only to retreat when faced with a united human response." "This feels different," Mara countered, earning a sharp look from Ives. "The Warlord's public broadcast across all human frequencies suggests he wants to sow panic. It's a psychological tactic meant to divide us, to make us consider appeasement rather than resistance." Counselor Jensen of the European Federation leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we should mobilize for war, Captain, based on a single threat?" "I'm suggesting we prepare to defend ourselves," Mara clarified. "The Vanguard was ambushed in the Ceres field by Zelthian interceptors. They were waiting for us, which indicates this was not a spontaneous action, but a coordinated military operation." High Counselor Diaz frowned. "That does change the calculus. Ambassador Ives, your response?" Ives moved to the center of the floor, her diplomatic corps insignia catching the light. "We should consider all options. Yes, we must bolster our defenses, but we should also open a direct channel to the Zelthian High Command. Warlord Zellar is but one voice in their Council of Elders." "A voice that commands their largest battle fleet," Mara pointed out. Ives fixed her with a measured gaze. "Captain, I respect your military expertise, but diplomacy requires patience. Starting a war we might not win is not in humanity's best interest." "With all due respect, Ambassador," Mara replied, struggling to keep her tone even. "The war has already started. The only question is whether we acknowledge it." The debate continued for hours, fracturing along predictable lines. The inter-system representatives advocated for diplomatic solutions, protected as they were by layers of defense grids and patrol fleets. The Outer Rim colonies, more vulnerable to Zelthian incursion, pushed for immediate military response. As the session finally adjourned for the day, Mara found herself walking alongside Ambassador Ives through the grand corridor outside the chamber. "You made quite an impression in there, Captain," Ives remarked, her tone neutral. I simply stated the facts as I see them, Mara replied. Facts colored by your experience, Ives countered. The council needs objective analysis, not calls to arms. Mara stopped walking, turning to face the older woman. With respect, Ambassador. You weren't there. You didn't see how effortlessly they ambushed us, how coordinated their attack was. This isn't a diplomatic misunderstanding. It's a calculated first strike. Perhaps, Ives allowed. But rushing headlong into conflict won't save those frontier colonies. It might doom them faster. Doing nothing will definitely doom them, Mara insisted. Ives studied her for a long moment. There are efforts underway that you're not privy to, Captain. Channels of communication that remain open despite appearances. What kind of channels? The kind that don't appear in military briefings, Ives replied cryptically. Not all Zelthians share Zellar's expansionist vision. We have friends among their ruling castes. Mara's eyes narrowed. You're telling me we have Zelthian informants? Why wasn't this shared with the council? Because walls have ears, Captain, Ives said softly. And some allies are too valuable to expose prematurely. Before Mara could press further, Ives's comm unit chimed. The ambassador checked it, her expression shifting subtly. I must go. But consider this. Captain Lin. Sometimes the loudest voice for war is the one most afraid of losing power. That's as true for Zelthians as it is for humans. With that enigmatic statement, Ives departed, leaving Mara alone with her thoughts and a growing suspicion that the political battlefield might be as treacherous as any she'd faced in space. In the sterile confines of the Xenobiological Research Facility on Luna Base, Dr. Ezra Cole peered through a microscope at what might be humanity's salvation or its damnation. The sample, a culture of modified terraforming microbes recovered from a raided Zelthian research outpost, pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm. They've weaponized our own technology against us, he murmured to his research partner, Dr. Amara Singh. These are definitely derived from the Hammond-Cho terraforming strain, but they've been modified on the genetic level to target specific biological markers. Singh leaned closer, her brow furrowed. Human markers? Not quite, Cole replied, adjusting the magnification. They're targeting the symbiotic bacteria we use in our agricultural terraforming process. Without those bacteria, our colony worlds would lose 80% of their food production capacity within a single growing season. Starvation is a weapon, Singh said grimly, elegant in its cruelty. Cole straightened, wincing as his back protested the movement. 3 days with minimal sleep had left him feeling twice his 42 years. The question is, can we develop a countermeasure in time? And should we? Singh raised an eyebrow. Should we? These microbes are highly adaptable, Cole explained, gesturing to the data scrolling across his tablet. If we create a countermeasure, the Zelthians will simply modify their weapon. It's an arms race we might not win. He paused, a darker thought taking shape. But if we were to turn their own research against them? You're suggesting we weaponize it further? Singh asked, her voice carefully neutral. Cole met her gaze. The Zelthian ships, they're living corridors. They're partially organic, grown rather than built. These microbes could be modified to target those organic components. That would be crossing a significant ethical line. Ezra, Singh warned, biological warfare is banned under the Titan Accords. So is targeting civilian food supplies, Cole countered. Besides, I'm not suggesting we deploy such a weapon, but having the capability, it could serve as a deterrent. Their discussion was interrupted by the laboratory door sliding open, revealing Captain Mara Lin in her formal uniform, flanked by security personnel. Dr. Cole? She inquired, though it was clearly not a question. I need to speak with you regarding your research. Immediately. Cole exchanged a glance with Singh before nodding. Of course, Captain. My office is this way. Once the door to Cole's cramped office closed behind them, Mara dispensed with formalities. "I've been briefed on your discovery, Doctor. I need to know exactly what we're facing and what options we have." Cole gestured for her to sit, then activated a privacy field that hummed softly around the perimeter of the room. "Captain, what I'm about to share isn't in my official report yet. The Zelthian bioweapon is more advanced than we initially believed. It doesn't just target our terraforming bacteria. It can adapt to attack any Earth-derived biological system." Mara's expression darkened. "Including humans?" "Potentially, yes. Though that would require significant modification." Cole ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "The more immediate threat is to our colony ecosystems. If deployed, this weapon would render our outer worlds uninhabitable within months." "And a countermeasure?" Cole hesitated. "Possible, but not guaranteed. The Zelthian genetic engineering is elegant. They've built in redundancies and adaptive mechanisms that make neutralizing the threat exceptionally difficult." Mara leaned forward. "What about turning it against them? Could their weapon be modified to target Zelthian biology?" The directness of the question shouldn't have surprised Cole, but it did. He studied the captain's face, noting the determination in her eyes and the tension in her jaw. "Theoretically, yes," he admitted. "Their ship's organic components would be particularly vulnerable. But, Captain, such a weapon would violate every ethical standard of xenobiological research, not to mention interstellar law." "And if the alternative is watching human colonies starve?" Mara challenged. "Dr. Cole, I've just come from a council meeting where half the representatives were arguing for appeasement in the face of explicit Zelthian threats. We need options, all options, on the table." Cole removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Creating such a weapon wouldn't be simple. I'd need access to more comprehensive Zelthian biological samples, particularly from their shipbuilding organisms." "What if I could get you those samples?" Mara asked, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. Cole stared at her. "How?" "The Council has authorized a covert operation to infiltrate a Zelthian dreadnought and steal their command codes. If I added sample collection to the mission parameters?" "It would be incredibly dangerous," Cole warned. "The organic components of their ships are highly integrated with security systems. Any attempt to extract samples would likely trigger alerts." "My team will be prepared," Mara assured him. "The question is, could you develop an effective countermeasure or weapon with such samples?" Cole fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His entire career had been dedicated to creating life, to developing microbes that could transform hostile alien environments into habitable worlds for humanity. The idea of perverting that knowledge, of creating something designed to destroy rather than build. But then, he thought of the colonies, places like New Montana and Proxima Centauri III, where families lived in terraformed domes, utterly dependent on the delicate balance of introduced bacteria to sustain their ecosystems. If the Zelthians deployed their weapon, those colonies wouldn't just fail, they would die. "I would need specialized equipment," he said finally, "and a secure facility isolated from Luna Base's main systems." Mara nodded. "I'll make it happen. Prepare a list of everything you need." As she stood to leave, Cole called after her. "Captain Lin, if we do this, if we develop this weapon, we need to be absolutely certain before deployment. The consequences of uncontrolled release could be catastrophic." "Let's hope it never comes to that, Doctor," Mara replied. But the grimness in her tone suggested she held little such hope. After she left, Cole returned to his microscope, staring at the elegant, deadly dance of the modified microbes. They were beautiful in their way, a testament to Zelthian ingenuity and precision. And soon, he might be tasked with creating something even more terrible in response. The line between defender and destroyer had never seemed so thin. The briefing room aboard the UES Vanguard hummed with tension as Captain Mara Lin addressed the assembled strike team. Behind her, a holographic display rotated slowly, showing the enormous, asymmetrical bulk of a Zelthian dreadnought. The inexorable shadow. Mara identified the target. Flagship of Warlord Zellar's Third Fleet, currently stationed in the Hercules system, near our outer colony worlds. Our mission is twofold: to extract their command codes, giving our fleet a tactical advantage in the coming conflict, and to secure biological samples from their living ship systems. XO Moreno, standing at her side, activated a different hologram, showing the interior layout of the vessel. Zelthian ships are unlike anything in our fleet. They're partially grown rather than built, with organic components integrated throughout the superstructure. These living corridors serve as both structural support and internal security. Lieutenant Wei pointed to a pulsing node near the center of the hologram. That's our primary target, the central neural hub. It houses both the command code repositories and the primary organic matter that controls the ship's biological functions. "How do we get aboard?" asked Sergeant Kowalski, leader of the Vanguard's Marine contingent. "Their defense systems can detect standard shuttle approaches from millions of kilometers away." Mara nodded to Science Officer Takeda, who stepped forward. "We've modified a standard cargo container with sensor dampening technology. The Zelthians regularly receive supply shipments from subservient species. We'll piggyback on one such delivery, scheduled for 26 hours from now." "Once aboard," Mara continued, "we'll have approximately 40 minutes before the ship's biological systems detect our presence through atmospheric changes. Team Alpha, led by myself and Lieutenant Wei, will secure the command codes. Team Bravo, under XO Moreno, will collect the biological samples Dr. Cole requires." Moreno's expression remained professional, but Mara didn't miss the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Since their conversation following the council meeting, her XO had been increasingly reserved, clearly uncomfortable with the direction their mission was taking. "Questions?" Mara prompted. Moreno spoke up. "Captain, the risk of triggering a full-scale war with this operation is significant. If we're captured, Commander, the war will already be underway," Mara replied firmly. "The Council has authorized this mission with full awareness of the risks. Our colonies need these codes and samples if we're to have any hope of survival." "And if we encounter civilians?" Moreno pressed. "Zelthian ships carry non-military personnel as well." "We avoid engagement where possible," Mara stated. "This is an extraction mission, not an attack. But make no mistake, if cornered, we will defend ourselves with lethal force." She surveyed the room. "Any other questions?" The silence that followed carried its own weight. "Very well. Gear up and report to Shuttle Bay 3 in 2 hours. Dismissed." As the team filed out, Moreno lingered behind. Mara knew what was coming. "Speak freely, Commander," she invited once they were alone. "This isn't just an intelligence mission anymore, is it?" Moreno asked quietly. "With those biological samples, we're opening the door to biological warfare." Mara met his gaze steadily. "We're opening the door to survival. Jax, the Zelthians have already developed a bioweapon that could wipe out our colony worlds. Dr. Cole needs those samples to develop a countermeasure. And potentially a weapon of our own," Moreno added. "Captain, I've served under you for 3 years. I know you believe in following regulations and ethical protocols. This," he gestured to the hologram of the Zelthian ship, "this feels like we're crossing a line we can't uncross." "Some lines are worth crossing to protect what matters," Mara replied, her voice softening slightly. "I don't make this decision lightly, but I've seen the data on what their bioweapon can do. If deployed against our colonies, billions would die slowly, painfully, as their environments collapse around them." Moreno was silent for a long moment. "I'll complete the mission, Captain, but I want my objection noted in the official record." "Noted, Commander," Mara acknowledged. "And Jax? I value your conscience. Don't lose it. even when I ask you to bend it." After he left, Mara turned back to the hologram, studying the alien vessel that might hold both salvation and damnation for humanity. The organic curves and asymmetrical design of the Zelthian dreadnought seemed to mock traditional human notions of starship architecture. Even in their vessels, the two species were fundamentally different, humans imposing order on the chaos of space, Zelthians embracing and enhancing that chaos. "Computer, show me the latest intelligence on Zelthian patrol patterns in the Hercules system," she commanded. As the display shifted to show tactical overlays, Mara couldn't help but wonder, was she leading her crew on a necessary mission to protect humanity, or taking the first irreversible step toward becoming the very monsters they feared? The answer, she suspected, would only become clear in the crucible of what lay ahead. The cargo container shuddered as it was drawn into the cavernous loading bay of the inexorable shadow. Inside the cramped, darkened space, Mara and her strike team waited in tense silence, each breath measured through the tactical masks that would filter out any Zelthian pheromone-based security measures. "Docking complete," whispered Lieutenant Wei, monitoring the sensor feeds on his wrist display. "External scans in progress. Stand by." Mara felt the familiar calm of pre-mission focus settling over her. 12 years of naval operations had taught her to channel fear into heightened awareness, to convert anxiety into precision. She checked her tactical gear one final time. Pulse rifle charged, combat knife secured, biosample containers nestled in her pack. "Scans complete," Wei updated. "Bay pressurizing now." Through the specially designed viewing port, Mara watched as Zelthian dock workers, their insectoid forms moving with unsettling grace, attached umbilical feeds to the neighboring containers. Their species resembled earth mantises in overall shape, but stood nearly 2 meters tall on powerful hind legs, their 4 upper limbs allowing for complex manipulation of tools and weapons. "Remember," Mara subvocalized through the team's comm system, "their vision operates primarily in the ultraviolet spectrum. Our adaptive camouflage should render us effectively invisible unless we move too quickly or cross directly into their line of sight." After an eternity compressed into minutes, the bay cleared of workers. Wei's sensors indicated the automated inventory systems were now processing the shipment. 30 seconds until we reach the optimal extraction window," he reported. Mara gave the hand signal for final preparations. Around her, the strike team activated their camouflage systems, their forms blurring slightly as the adaptive fabric began mimicking the surroundings. "Mark," Wei whispered. Mara pressed her palm against the container's hidden release mechanism. With a barely audible hiss, a section of the wall retracted, revealing the dimly lit expanse of the loading bay beyond. "Team Bravo, hold position until we secure the immediate area," Mara ordered. "Alpha Team, deploy." She slipped through the opening, pulse rifle at the ready, senses hyper-alert to any movement or sound. The air inside the Zelthian vessel was thick with unfamiliar scents, organic compounds that tickled the back of her throat despite the filtration mask. The bay was vast, with containers stacked in patterns that seemed chaotic to human eyes, but likely followed some alien logic. Overhead, semi-transparent tubes pulsed with luminescent fluid, part of the ship's organic circulatory system. "Clear," Mara signaled, after confirming no Zelthians remained in the immediate vicinity. The rest of Alpha Team emerged, followed by Bravo Team, led by Moreno. Wei consulted his specialized scanner, designed to track the unique energy signatures of Zelthian neural pathways. "Neural hub is 17 levels up," he reported softly. "Nearest access point is a maintenance shaft 200 meters east of our position. Bravo Team will need to divert to Deck 12, Moreno added. "The primary biological processing center is located there, according to intelligence." Mara nodded. "Proceed to the junction point at Sector 4 Alpha. Then we'll split up. Maintain comm silence unless absolutely necessary. Rendezvous at the extraction point in 35 minutes. They moved through the loading bay in perfect formation, a testament to countless hours of training. The Zelthian ship's interior was unlike any human vessel. Corridors curved organically, with walls that seemed to pulse subtly with life. Lighting came from bioluminescent panels that adjusted their glow as the team passed beneath, responding to motion, or heat, or some other stimulus human science had yet to fully understand. At the first junction, they encountered a Zelthian worker cast member performing maintenance on one of the pulsing tubes. The team froze, their camouflage systems adjusting to the new surroundings. The Zelthian continued its work, manipulating a tool that seemed to merge with its own chitinous appendage, apparently oblivious to the human intruders. Mara held her breath, signaling the others to remain absolutely still. After what felt like an eternity, the worker finished its task and moved away down an adjoining corridor. They continued forward, more cautiously now. Twice more they had to halt as Zelthian patrols passed nearby. Each time, their camouflage held, though Mara noticed with concern that one of the warrior caste Zelthians had paused, mandibles twitching as if sensing something amiss, before continuing on its way. When they reached the designated junction point, Mara turned to Moreno. "You have 30 minutes. Commander, get those samples and get out. If either team fails to reach the extraction point on time, the other continues the mission and escapes if possible." Moreno finished. "Standard protocol." Mara nodded. "Good hunting." "You too, Captain," Moreno replied, his earlier reservations seemingly set aside in the focus of the mission. As Bravo team disappeared down the organic corridor toward the biological processing center, Mara led Alpha team toward the maintenance shaft that would take them to the neural hub. The shaft itself was unlike anything in human ship design, a vertical tunnel lined with what appeared to be muscular tissue that contracted and expanded rhythmically. Handholds formed naturally in the tissue, while a central column of the same luminescent fluid they'd seen earlier provided dim illumination. "We climb," Mara ordered, securing her rifle and grasping the first handhold. "Way, you're on point. Kowalski, take rear guard." The ascent was unsettling. Each handhold seemed to react to their touch, initially tensing before relaxing to provide support. It was as if the ship itself were a living entity, aware of their presence but not yet identifying them as threats. 17 levels up, they emerged into a narrower corridor where the pulsing of the ship's organic systems was more pronounced. The walls here were lined with translucent veins, carrying not just the luminescent fluid, but also what appeared to be data, patterns of light flashing through specialized conduits. "Neural hub is 30 meters ahead," Wei whispered, consulting his scanner. "2 guards at the entrance." Mara gestured for the team to halt while she assessed the situation. The guards were warrior caste Zelthians, their chitinous exoskeletons enhanced with what appeared to be biomechanical armor. Each carried a particle lance, a weapon that could reduce a human to atoms in a single discharge. "We need a diversion," she decided. "Kowalski, place a sonic disruptor at junction 7 Gamma. Set it to mimic a coolant leak in 15 seconds. The sergeant nodded, detaching a small device from his belt and moving silently down an adjacent corridor. Moments later, he returned, giving Mara a thumbs up. The disruptor activated with a high-pitched whine that set Mara's teeth on edge despite her filtration mask. The Zelthian guards reacted immediately, their mandibles clicking rapidly in what intelligence had identified as their alarm communication. One remained at the door, while the other moved to investigate the sound. "Take the one at the door," Mara ordered Wei. "Silent takedown." Wei nodded, drawing a specialized weapon designed specifically for this mission. A compressed air launcher that fired darts containing a powerful neurotoxin tailored to Zelthian physiology. One shot, one kill, and virtually no sound. The guard collapsed without a cry. Its nervous system shut down before it could alert others. By the time the second guard returned, Wei was already concealed again, and a second dart ended the threat. Move the bodies into the alcove, Mara directed. Kowalski, set charges around the perimeter. If we need to make a quick exit, I want options. While the team secured the area, Mara approached the neural hub entrance, a sphincter-like opening that pulsed with bioelectric energy. According to their intelligence, the door would only open for Zelthians with the correct pheromone signatures. Apply the enzyme solution, she ordered. Y removed a spray canister from his pack and coated the edges of the sphincter with a carefully synthesized compound designed to mimic the chemical keys used by high-ranking Zelthians. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft squelching sound that turned Mara's stomach, the organic door dilated open. "We're in," she whispered. 17 minutes remaining. The neural hub beyond was like entering the brain of some vast organism. Columns of translucent tissue rose from floor to ceiling, each pulsing with data streams and neural impulses. At the center of the chamber stood a structure resembling a coral formation, glowing with internal light. "That's the command nexus," Wei confirmed, consulting his scanner. "All ship functions are controlled from there, including the command codes we need." Mara approached the structure cautiously. "How do we extract the codes?" "We need to establish a connection using the neural interface," Wei explained, removing a specialized device from his pack. "This will translate their organic data storage into something our systems can read." As Wei worked to connect the device to the pulsing coral structure, Mara kept watch, acutely aware of the passing minutes. The longer they remained, the greater the chance of discovery. "Status?" she prompted after several tense minutes. "Almost there," Wei replied, his face illuminated by the glow of his interface. "Their security systems are unusual, more like immune responses than conventional firewalls. The codes are..." "Got it." He looked up, triumph in his eyes. "Command code secured, Captain." Mara allowed herself a moment of relief. "Download complete?" "Yes. Full tactical database, including fleet movements and communication protocols." "Pack up. We move in 30 seconds." As Wei disconnected his device, a subtle change rippled through the chamber. The pulsing of the tissue columns accelerated, and the ambient light shifted from blue to a deep purple. "Captain," Kowalski called from the entrance. "Something's happening. The ship's organic systems are responding to our presence." Mara felt a chill run down her spine. "We've triggered an immune response. Move, now." They rushed from the chamber just as alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Not electronic sirens, but a biological keening that seemed to emanate from the very walls around them. The corridor outside the neural hub was already changing, the previously placid tissue now rippling with agitation. "Alternative route," Mara decided instantly. "Maintenance shaft is compromised. Wei, find us another way down." The lieutenant consulted his scanner. "Service conduit, 2 levels down. We can access it through the emergency response tubes." "Lead the way," Mara ordered, activating her comm unit. "Bravo team, our position is compromised. Proceed to extraction point immediately. Repeat, proceed to extraction immediately." Moreno's voice came back, tense but controlled. "Acknowledged, Alpha Leader. We have the samples and are en route. Be advised, we're encountering heavy resistance." As if to emphasize Moreno's warning, a squad of warrior-caste Zelthians rounded the corner ahead, particle lances at the ready, their compound eyes fixed on the human intruders, mandibles clicking in what might have been surprise or rage. "Contact front!" Mara shouted, diving for cover as the first particle beam sizzled through the air where she had been standing. "Return fire! Defensive pattern echo!" The narrow corridor erupted in chaos as both sides exchanged fire. The human pulse rifles were devastating at close range, but the Zelthian warriors were protected by their natural armor and biomechanical enhancements. One went down, then another, but more appeared behind them. "We're outnumbered," Kowalski warned, firing a sustained burst that temporarily drove the Zelthians back. And those reinforcements look like royal guards. Mara spotted what the sergeant meant. Among the warrior-caste Zelthians, a larger figure had appeared, its exoskeleton bearing elaborate markings, and its weapons more advanced than the standard particle lances. "Fall back to Junction Point 7, she ordered. "Wei, deploy smoke canisters." As Wei released the specialized smoke, designed to disrupt Zelthian visual and olfactory senses, Mara provided covering fire. The team retreated in good order, but the Zelthians kept coming, some dropping to all 6 limbs to crawl beneath the smoke cloud. "Junction Point 7 secure," Kowalski reported as they reached the intersection. "Set the charges," Mara commanded. "We'll collapse the corridor behind us." While Kowalski armed the explosives, Mara and Wei held off the advancing Zelthians. A particle beam grazed Mara's shoulder, burning through her tactical gear and searing the skin beneath. She gritted her teeth against the pain, continuing to fire with mechanical precision. "Charges set," Kowalski called. 10-second timer." "Fall back," Mara ordered. "Move, move, move." They sprinted down the adjoining corridor, the sounds of Zelthian pursuit close behind. At the 10-second mark, the charges detonated with a thunderous roar, collapsing the biological structure of the corridor and temporarily blocking their pursuers. "That won't hold them long," Wei warned, checking his scanner. "The ship can regenerate damaged sections." "It doesn't need to hold them long," Mara replied. "Just long enough for us to reach the extraction point. This way." They navigated through increasingly hostile territory. The ship itself seemed to be fighting them now, corridors constricting, doors refusing to open, bioluminescent lighting pulsing with alarm patterns that drew Zelthian security forces toward their position. When they finally reached the service conduit Wei had identified, they found it partially blocked by a membranous growth that had formed since the alarm was triggered. "Cut through it," Mara ordered, drawing her combat knife. The specialized blade, designed to slice through Zelthian organic technology, made short work of the membrane, revealing the vertical shaft beyond. "Descent cables," she directed. "Quick drop protocol." They attached their harnesses to the specially designed cables and began a controlled fall through the shaft, dropping several levels in seconds. Above them, Zelthian warriors appeared at the opening, firing down at the retreating humans. "Incoming!" Wei warned as a particle beam narrowly missed his head. Mara released one hand from her cable, long enough to fire a sustained burst upward, forcing the Zelthians to take cover. The diversion cost her control of her descent. She slammed hard against the side of the shaft, aggravating her shoulder wound. By the time they reached the bottom, all 3 were breathing heavily, and Mara's tactical suit was showing signs of damage in multiple places. But they were alive, and still on track to reach the extraction point. "Com check with Bravo team," she ordered as they regrouped. Wei attempted to establish contact, but shook his head. "No response, Captain. Either they've gone to comm silence or—" He didn't need to finish the thought. In this environment, no response could mean capture or worse. "We proceed to the extraction point," Mara decided. "If they're not there, we wait as long as we can." The lower levels of the ship were even more chaotic than those above. The Zelthians had fully mobilized their security forces, and twice the team had to engage in firefights that left Mara worried about their dwindling ammunition. When they finally reached the corridor leading to the loading bay where their escape vessel waited, they found it blocked by a full squad of royal guards, led by a figure Mara recognized immediately from intelligence briefings. Warlord Zellar's second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vextier. "Fall back," Mara whispered, pulling her team into an adjacent maintenance alcove. "We need another approach." "There isn't one," Wei replied grimly. "All other routes to the loading bay are sealed by security bulkheads." Mara assessed their options rapidly. "Kowalski, how many charges do we have left?" 3, Captain. Not enough to take out that entire squad." "We don't need to take them out," Mara realized. "We just need to create enough confusion to slip past." "Wei, Do you still have that neural disruptor we were supposed to use as a last resort? The lieutenant nodded, removing a small spherical device from a protected compartment in his pack. It'll disable their organic systems within a 50-meter radius for approximately 30 seconds. But Captain, at this range, it could cause permanent damage to the ship's neural pathways. That's the idea, Mara replied. Set it for maximum yield. Wei hesitated only briefly before programming the device. Ready, Captain. On my mark. We throw the disruptor, then rush them while they're disoriented. Head straight for the loading bay. Don't stop for anything. Mara checked her weapon one final time. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Wei hurled the disruptor into the midst of the Zelthian squad. It detonated with a silent pulse of energy that rippled visibly through the air. The effect on the Zelthians was immediate and devastating. They collapsed, their nervous systems temporarily overloaded by the disruption of the ship's neural field, to which they were connected. Now! Mara shouted, leading the charge through the incapacitated Zelthians. They sprinted down the corridor, jumping over fallen warriors. Behind them, the ship's organic systems were already beginning to recover, the lights pulsing with renewed intensity. 30 seconds! Wei called out the countdown as they ran. The loading bay doors loomed ahead, partially contracted in response to the security alert. Mara and her team slipped through the narrowing gap just as the first Zelthians began to recover behind them. Inside the bay, chaos reigned. Alarms keened through the vast space, and emergency containment protocols had sealed most of the exits. Their modified cargo container sat where they had left it, seemingly untouched. And beside it, to Mara's immense relief, stood Commander Moreno and his team, already preparing for extraction. Commander, she called out as they approached. Status? Samples secured, Moreno reported, his face grim beneath a layer of what appeared to be Zelthian ichor. We lost Petrova near the biological processing center. Heavy resistance. Mara absorbed the news of the lost team member with a sharp pang of grief that she immediately compartmentalized. There would be time for mourning later. Into the container. Now. Wei, prep the escape sequence. As the combined teams crowded into the cargo container, Mara took a final look at the alien ship that had nearly become their tomb. Already, warrior-caste Zelthians were flooding into the loading bay, led by the recovered sub-commander Vextier. Seal it, she ordered, stepping inside. The container door slid shut just as the first particle beams struck its exterior. The specialized shielding would hold briefly, but not for long. Ejection sequence initiated, Wei announced, activating the emergency systems they had installed. Explosive bolts will fire in 5, 4. The container shuddered as the Zelthians intensified their attack. 3, 2, 1, mark. With a violent jolt, the container blasted free from the Zelthian dreadnought, shooting into space powered by its concealed thrusters. Behind them, the massive alien vessel was already moving to pursue, its organic form rippling with damage from their infiltration, but still very much combat-ready. Rendezvous coordinates transmitted to the Vanguard, Wei confirmed. ETA to pick up, 17 minutes. Can we evade the dreadnought that long? Moreno asked, peering at the tactical display. We have to, Mara replied, taking control of the navigation systems. Because if we don't, humanity just lost its best chance at survival. As she guided their makeshift escape craft through the debris field surrounding the Zelthian vessel, Mara tried not to think about the consequences of what they had just done. They had the command codes. They had the biological samples. But they had also just committed what the Zelthians would undoubtedly consider an act of war. Then again, perhaps that war had been inevitable from the moment Warlord Zellar issued his ultimatum. Now, at least, humanity would have weapons for the fight ahead, both technological and biological. Mara only hoped they wouldn't come to regret using them. In the observation lounge of the UES Vanguard, Captain Mara Lin watched as the news feeds reported the latest Zelthian attack. The agricultural dome on Proxima Centauri III burned against the night sky, its transparent panels shattered by precision orbital strikes. According to the emergency broadcasts, over 3,000 colonists had been killed in the initial bombardment, with thousands more injured or missing. It was the fourth such attack in the week since their raid on the inexorable Shadow. The Zelthians had apparently abandoned any pretense of diplomacy, launching strikes against vulnerable human outposts along the frontier. What had begun as border skirmishes and ultimatums had escalated into open warfare. "It's happening faster than we anticipated," Exo Moreno observed, standing beside her. "Intelligence suggested they would wait until their entire fleet was positioned." "They're sending a message," Mara replied, her voice tight, "reminding us of our vulnerability while they prepare for something bigger." The door to the observation lounge slid open, admitting Ambassador Rain Ives. The diplomat looked haggard. The usual poise of her diplomatic corps uniform now rumpled from what must have been days of crisis negotiations. "Captain Lin," she greeted, her tone formal but not hostile. "Commander Moreno, I've just come from an emergency council session. I thought you should hear the news directly." Mara gestured to a seat, but Ives remained standing. "What's happened, Ambassador?" "The Council has voted to authorize full military response against the Zelthian Empire," Ives replied. "Your raid on their flagship, while technically successful, has accelerated their timetable for conquest. They're moving against all our outer colonies now, not just the resource worlds they initially demanded." "And our special project?" Mara asked carefully. Ives's expression tightened. "Dr. Cole reports significant progress with the biological samples you recovered. The Council has authorized continued development of both defensive and offensive applications." "You opposed this decision," Mara observed. "I did," Ives acknowledged. "Not because I don't see the necessity, but because I fear what happens after we cross that line. Biological warfare has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate tactical advantage." "So does surrender," Mara countered. "You've seen the casualty reports from Proxima Centauri. The Zelthians aren't interested in negotiation anymore, if they ever were." Ives sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 67 years. "Perhaps you're right, Captain. My sources among the Zelthian moderates have gone silent. It seems Warlord Zellar has consolidated power within their Council of Elders, silencing any voices of restraint." "What does the Council expect of us now?" Moreno asked. "The Vanguard and 3 other capital ships are being reassigned to the defense of Nova Prime," Ives informed them. "Intelligence suggests it will be the Zelthians' next major target. As our most developed outer colony, its fall would be devastating to morale and strategic positioning." Mara nodded. Nova Prime housed nearly 15 million colonists and served as the primary shipbuilding facility for the outer systems. Its orbital defense grid was formidable, but not designed to withstand a full Zelthian assault. "When do we deploy?" she asked. "Immediately," Ives replied. "The Zelthian fleet has already been detected moving into position. You'll rendezvous with Admiral Chen's battle group near the Oort cloud transit point." "And Dr. Cole's research?" "A secure laboratory has been established on Nova Prime's second moon," Ives said. "Dr. Cole and his team will transfer there to continue their work. The Council feels having the bioweapon research close to the expected battlefield may prove advantageous." The implication was clear. If Nova Prime faced imminent defeat, the bioweapon might be deployed as a last resort. "I understand," Mara said quietly. Ives moved to leave, but paused at the door. "Captain Lin, despite our disagreements about methods, I want you to know I respect your dedication to protecting our people. The choices ahead will not be easy for any of us." After the ambassador departed, Moreno turned to Mara. "Your orders, Captain." "Prepare the ship for immediate departure," she replied. "And have communications. Send a message to Dr. Cole. I want to know exactly what we're defending, or deploying, before we reach Nova Prime." As the Vanguard broke orbit from Earth, hours later, Mara stood on the bridge watching the blue-green jewel of humanity's homeworld recede on the view screen. She couldn't help but wonder if she would ever see it again, or if the decisions she had set in motion would forever change what it meant to be human in this hostile universe. The report from Dr. Ezra Cole arrived as the Vanguard approached the Oort cloud transit point. Mara read it in the privacy of her ready room, the implications of the xenobiologist's findings sending a chill through her that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. "Unbelievable," she murmured, scrolling through the detailed analysis. According to Cole's research, the biological samples they had recovered from the Zelthian dreadnought revealed something far more significant than they had initially realized. The door chimed, and Mara called for entry. XO, Moreno stepped in, his expression concerned. "You wanted to see me, Captain?" Mara gestured to the seat across from her desk. "I've just received Dr. Cole's preliminary findings. I think you should see them." She transferred the report to Moreno's tablet. As he read, his brow furrowed progressively deeper. "This can't be right," he said finally, looking up. "The Zelthian ships aren't just partially organic. They're genetically engineered extensions of the Zelthians themselves, sharing the same base DNA?" "Apparently so," Mara confirmed. "Dr. Cole believes the living corridors we encountered aren't merely biological technology. They're essentially grown from modified Zelthian genetic material. The ships aren't just vessels. They're more like exoskeletons or colonial organisms. Which means the bioweapon he's developing wouldn't just target their ships," Mara finished grimly. "It would potentially affect all Zelthian biological systems, including the Zelthians themselves." Moreno set the tablet down carefully, as if it might explode. "Captain, this goes far beyond tactical advantage. This is potentially genocidal." "I know." Mara rose from her chair, moving to the small viewport that showed the star-flecked void outside. "I've already communicated these findings to High Command. They're proceeding with development nonetheless." "And you support this decision?" Moreno asked, his voice carefully neutral. Mara turned to face him. "I support protecting human lives, Commander. The Zelthians have already demonstrated their willingness to target our civilians. They fired the first shot in this biological war with their terraforming microbe weapon. There's a difference between targeting our food supply and targeting an entire species for extinction," Moreno countered. "Dr. Cole believes the weapon can be calibrated," Mara replied. "Targeted to affect only the ship-based organisms without spreading to the Zelthian homeworlds. Do you believe that's how it would be used? If Nova Prime faces destruction, do you truly think the Council would exercise such restraint?" The question hung in the air between them, uncomfortable in its honesty. Before Mara could formulate an answer, the ship's comm system activated. "Bridge to Captain Lin," came the voice of Lieutenant Wei. "We're approaching the transit point. Admiral Chen's battle group is standing by for our arrival." "Acknowledged," Mara responded. "I'll be on the bridge momentarily." She turned back to Moreno as the communication ended. "We have our orders, Commander. For now, our job is to defend Nova Prime. The decision to deploy the bioweapon isn't ours to make." "Isn't it?" Moreno challenged. "We collected the samples. We made this possible." "And we did so to save human lives," Mara reminded him. "A goal I still believe in, even with these new complications." She softened her tone slightly. "I value your moral compass, Jax. I always have. But right now, we have 15 million colonists counting on us to protect them from annihilation." Moreno stood, straightening his uniform. "Yes, Captain, and I will execute my duties to the best of my ability. I just hope we recognize ourselves when this is over." As he left, Mara gathered her thoughts before heading to the bridge. The weight of command had never felt heavier. She had always prided herself on following regulations, on making decisions within clear ethical boundaries. But those boundaries seemed to blur more with each passing day of this conflict. Was she becoming the very thing she had sworn to fight against? Or was this simply the cost of ensuring humanity's survival in a universe that showed no mercy to the unprepared? The Vanguard emerged from the transit point into the Nova Prime system, joining Admiral Chen's battle group already in defensive formation around the colony world. From orbit, Nova Prime resembled Earth: blue oceans, green continents, swirling white cloud patterns. But unlike Earth, a massive orbital defense grid encircled the planet, its weapon platforms and shield generators forming a protective web against invasion. "Status report," Mara requested as she entered the bridge. "Admiral Chen has assigned us to Defensive Quadrant 4. Lieutenant Wei reported. The Zelthian fleet has been detected at the system's edge, approaching at sublight speed. Estimated time to weapons range, 6 hours. Fleet composition? 3 dreadnoughts, including the inexorable Shadow, plus approximately 20 support vessels." Mara studied the tactical display. "That's a significant commitment of forces. They're not taking any chances with Nova Prime." "Captain," Communications Officer Takeda called out. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Chen. Priority channel." "On screen," Mara ordered. The weathered face of Admiral Helena Chen appeared on the main view screen. Unlike many senior officers, Chen wore her battle scars proudly, a network of thin white lines across her left cheek, souvenirs from an early encounter with Zelthian boarding parties. "Captain Lin," she greeted, her voice carrying the authoritative edge that had made her legendary among the fleet. "Welcome to what will likely be the defining battle of this war." "Admiral," Mara acknowledged with a respectful nod. "The Vanguard stands ready." "Good, because I have new orders for you." Chen's expression grew even more serious. "I've just received word from High Command. Dr. Cole's bioweapon has been completed and deemed viable. A deployment module is being prepared on Nova Prime's second moon as we speak." Mara felt the bridge crew's attention focus on her, though they maintained professional composure at their stations. "I see," she replied carefully. "Am I to assume the Vanguard will be involved in deployment operations?" "More than involved, Captain. You're to lead them." Chen activated a secondary display showing technical schematics. "The weapon requires direct delivery to the Zelthian flagship's central neural hub, the same location from which you extracted the command codes. Given your first-hand experience with Zelthian ship layout and security systems, you're the obvious choice for this mission." Mara processed this information rapidly. "Admiral, penetrating their defenses a second time will be significantly more difficult. They'll have adapted their security protocols since our raid, which is why you'll be using the command codes you acquired to disable their primary shields," Chen explained. "A small strike team will then board the flagship and deliver the bioweapon directly to the neural hub, ensuring maximum effectiveness and minimizing the risk of the contagion spreading beyond the target." "Understood, Admiral. When do we begin mission preparations?" "Immediately. Report to coordinates 739 for secure briefing with Dr. Cole and the tactical team. Chen out." As the transmission ended, Mara turned to find Exo Moreno watching her, his expression unreadable. "Commander, you have the bridge," she said. "Set condition yellow throughout the ship and begin battle preparations. I'll return after the briefing." "Yes, Captain," Moreno replied formally. As Mara headed for the shuttle bay that would take her to the briefing coordinates, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. The bioweapon represented a fundamental shift in the nature of this conflict, from conventional warfare to something that could redefine the very notion of warfare itself. And she would be the one to deliver it. The secure laboratory on Nova Prime's barren second moon hummed with activity as Dr. Ezra Cole made final adjustments to what appeared to be a simple metallic cylinder, no larger than a human forearm. Around him, a team of specialists worked at various stations, monitoring simulations and running last-minute diagnostics. "The delivery mechanism is deceptively simple," Cole explained to Mara as she observed their work. But the contents represent perhaps the most sophisticated bioengineering project in human history. Mara studied the unassuming container. It's smaller than I expected. Size isn't relevant here, Cole replied, his voice carrying the strain of too many sleepless nights. Once released into the neural hub, the engineered microbes will self-replicate using the organic material of the ship itself. The spread will be exponential, from the hub to the living corridors to the critical systems. Within hours, the ship will effectively die. And the Zelthian crew? Cole hesitated, removing his glasses to clean them, a nervous habit Mara had noticed during their previous interactions. That's where things become complicated. The neural connection between Zelthians and their ships is more profound than we initially understood. When the ship's systems begin to fail, the crew will experience a form of neural feedback. For those most deeply connected to the ship's functions, particularly the command cast, the effect will be similar to massive stroke. They'll die with their ship, Mara translated bluntly. Many will, yes, Cole acknowledged, though those with less direct neural integration should survive, albeit with significant trauma. And what about spread beyond the target vessel? You mentioned the possibility of calibrating the weapon to prevent wider contamination. Cole's expression tightened. I did succeed in creating a limiting factor, a genetic key that should prevent the microbes from functioning outside their intended environment. However, Mara prompted when he trailed off. Biological systems are inherently unpredictable, Cole admitted, particularly when dealing with the hybrid organic technological interface of Zelthian design. In controlled simulations, containment holds at a 93% confidence level, but real-world deployment, he shrugged helplessly. There are variables we simply cannot account for. Mara absorbed this information with growing unease. What's the worst-case scenario, Doctor? If containment fails completely? Cole met her gaze directly. The worst case? The microbes adapt to target all Zelthian biological systems, not just their ships. They spread through ship-to-ship contact, eventually reaching Zelthian colonies and potentially their homeworld. We're talking about a pandemic that could devastate their entire species. And you developed this weapon knowing that risk? I developed it because the alternative was watching human colonies starve, as the Zelthians deployed their own bioweapon against us, Cole replied, a flash of defensiveness in his tone. This isn't something I undertook lightly, Captain. I wasn't suggesting it was, Mara assured him. I'm simply trying to understand exactly what I'm being asked to deliver. Cole softened slightly. For what it's worth, I've included an emergency neutralization protocol. If deployed within 12 hours of the initial release, it should halt the microbe's replication cycle and render them inert. A failsafe, Mara noted. Does High Command know about this feature? They do, Cole confirmed, though I doubt they anticipate using it. The strategic advantage of crippling the Zelthian fleet is too significant to relinquish willingly. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Chen and a team of special operations officers. The Admiral's expression was grim as she surveyed the laboratory. Is the weapon ready, Dr. Cole? She asked without preamble. Final calibrations are complete, Admiral, Cole replied. It's ready for deployment. Chen nodded. Good. Captain Lin, your strike team has been assembled. These operators, she gestured to the black uniformed personnel behind her, are our best infiltration specialists. They'll accompany you aboard the Zelthian flagship. With respect, Admiral, Mara replied. I'd prefer to use my own people. Commander Moreno and Lieutenant Wei have first-hand experience with Zelthian ship layouts and security systems. This isn't up for debate, Captain, Chen said firmly. High Command has designated this a special operations mission. Your role is to get them aboard using the command codes you acquired, then provide tactical guidance based on your previous infiltration. Commander Voss here will lead the actual deployment team. The lead special operations officer, a hard-faced woman with a cybernetic eye implant, gave Mara a curt nod. The Zelthian fleet will be within weapons range in less than 4 hours, Chen continued. Your strike team will launch 30 minutes before engagement, using the confusion of the initial battle as cover for your approach. The mission parameters are simple. Deliver the weapon to the neural hub, activate it, and extract before the effects begin to manifest. And if we encounter complications? Mara asked. The mission proceeds regardless of complications, Chen stated. The fate of Nova Prime, potentially of all human colonies, depends on successful deployment. Is that understood? Understood, Admiral, Mara replied, though the categorical nature of the orders troubled her. As the briefing continued, detailing insertion vectors and extraction protocols, Mara found her thoughts returning to Exo Moreno's earlier question. Did she truly believe the Council would exercise restraint with such a weapon? The answer, she now realized, was becoming increasingly clear and increasingly disturbing. This was no longer about tactical advantage or even defensive necessity. This was about ensuring Zelthian forces could never threaten humanity again, regardless of the cost. And she was to be the instrument of that assurance. When Mara returned to the Vanguard, she found Exo Moreno waiting in her ready room, a data tablet in his hand and concern etched on his features. I've been reviewing Dr. Cole's latest report, he said without preamble. The containment protocols for the bioweapon are theoretical at best. If deployed, there's a significant risk of uncontrolled spread throughout the Zelthian population. I know, Mara replied, moving to her desk. Dr. Cole briefed me personally. And you're still proceeding with the mission? Those are my orders, Commander. Moreno placed the tablet on her desk. Captain, I've served under you for 3 years. I've seen you risk your career to uphold ethical protocols and regulations. This mission crosses every red line in the book. We're at war, Mara reminded him. Red lines have a way of blurring when 15 million colonists face extinction. There's a difference between fighting a war and committing genocide, Moreno insisted. If this weapon works as designed, or worse, if it works beyond its design, we could be responsible for wiping out an entire sentient species. Mara sank into her chair, suddenly feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. What would you have me do, Jax? Refuse the mission? That won't stop it from proceeding. Someone else will deliver the weapon. Perhaps someone without Dr. Cole's failsafe mechanism. Failsafe? Moreno asked, momentarily thrown. Cole built in a neutralization protocol, Mara explained. If deployed within 12 hours of release, it can halt the contagion's spread. Understanding dawned in Moreno's eyes. So you could deploy the weapon as ordered, but ensure the failsafe is activated before widespread contamination occurs. Potentially, Mara agreed, though it would mean directly countermanding High Command's orders. That's court-martial territory at minimum. Better a court-martial than genocide on our conscience, Moreno said quietly. Mara studied her XO thoughtfully. Despite their occasional disagreements, she had always valued his moral clarity, his ability to see the ethical implications that sometimes became obscured in the fog of command decisions. I need to know where you stand, Commander, she said finally. Because if I undertake this course of action, I'll need officers I can trust implicitly. This goes beyond normal chain of command. This is about deciding what kind of future humanity will have, and what price we're willing to pay for it. Moreno straightened, his decision already made. I stand with you, Captain. Whatever you decide. Mara nodded, a weight lifting slightly from her shoulders. Then, prepare a secure communication channel to Dr. Cole. There are details we need to discuss before deployment. As Moreno left to carry out her instructions, Mara turned to the viewport, watching as Nova Prime rotated serenely below, unaware of the momentous decisions being made in its orbit. 15 million souls depended on her to protect them, but countless Zelthian lives hung in the balance as well. The right choice had never seemed so elusive. The battle for Nova Prime began with a symphony of destruction. The Zelthian fleet emerged from sublight at the system's edge, their organic vessels rippling with weapon ports and energy signatures that blazed across human sensor arrays. The orbital defense grid responded immediately, massive particle cannons and missile platforms unleashing their fury upon the approaching enemy. From the bridge of the Vanguard, Mara watched the tactical display with grim focus. Admiral Chen's battle group had formed a secondary defensive line between the orbital grid and the planet itself, the last barrier should the grid fail. "Strike team is prepared for launch," Commander Moreno reported. "Special Operations Commander Voss reports all systems green." Mara nodded. "Very well. Begin final countdown." The plan was elegant in its simplicity, if horrifying in its implications. While the main battle raged, drawing Zelthian attention to the defense of Nova Prime, a specially modified stealth shuttle would approach the inexorable shadow from its ventral blind spot. Using the command codes Mara's team had stolen in their previous raid, they would temporarily disable a section of the flagship's shields, allowing the strike team to dock and infiltrate. "T-5 minutes to launch," Tactical Officer Wei announced. Mara rose from her command chair. "Commander Moreno, you have the bridge. Maintain position in the battle line and follow Admiral Chen's tactical directives." "Aye, Captain," Moreno replied, their eyes meeting briefly in silent communication. He knew what she intended, not just the official mission, but the moral compromise she had determined to make. Mara made her way to the launch bay, where the strike team waited. 6 Special Operations personnel stood in formation beside the sleek, black-hulled stealth shuttle, their tactical gear designed specifically for operating in Zelthian environments. Commander Voss approached as Mara entered. "Captain Lin," she greeted formally. "My team is ready. We've studied the layouts from your previous infiltration and have plotted the most direct route to the neural hub." "Good," Mara replied. "There's been a slight modification to the command structure. I'll be personally leading the deployment phase of the mission." Voss's cybernetic eye whirred as it adjusted focus, a sign of surprise. Mara had learned, "With respect, Captain, my orders come directly from Admiral Chen. I am to lead the deployment team." "Your orders have been updated," Mara stated, producing a data chip containing coded authorization. "High Command has determined that my first-hand knowledge of the target location is essential for successful placement of the weapon." Voss accepted the chip reluctantly, inserting it into her tactical pad. After a moment, she nodded stiffly. "Authenticated. Though I must say, Captain, it's unusual for a vessel commander to undertake such a high-risk infiltration." "These are unusual times, Commander," Mara replied evenly. "Now, let's review the approach vector one more time." As they boarded the shuttle, Mara felt the familiar tension that preceded combat, the heightened awareness, the crystalline clarity of purpose. But this time, it was tempered by the weight of the decision she had made during her secure communication with Dr. Cole. The bioweapon would be deployed as ordered. The Zelthian flagship would be crippled, potentially turning the tide of the battle. But afterward, when the mission was officially complete, Mara would ensure the neutralization protocol was activated before the contagion could spread to other vessels or worlds. It was a compromise that would likely end her career, possibly even land her in a military prison. But it was one she could live with, one that might let her sleep again someday. "Launch sequence initiated," announced the shuttle pilot as the bay doors began to open. "May the odds be in our favor." The stealth shuttle slipped away from the Vanguard, its advanced propulsion system barely registering on sensors as it curved toward the chaotic heart of the battle. Ahead, the massive silhouette of the inexorable shadow dominated the tactical display, its organic hull bristling with weapon emplacements that fired continuously at the human defenders. "Approaching optimal insertion vector," the pilot reported. "Shields at maximum. Stealth systems operating within parameters." Mara studied the sensor readings of the Zelthian flagship. searching for any signs that their approach had been detected. So far, the chaos of the larger battle seemed to be providing the cover they needed. "Begin command code transmission on my mark," she ordered, moving to the specialized console where the stolen codes had been loaded. 3, 2, 1, mark. Her fingers flew across the interface, initiating the complex sequence that would momentarily confuse the Zelthian ship's defensive systems. According to their intelligence, the codes would create a localized shield failure lasting approximately 20 seconds, just enough time for their shuttle to slip through. "Code transmission complete," she reported. "Status." For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the tactical display flickered, showing a small section of the Zelthian vessel's ventral shields wavering and collapsing. "Shield breach confirmed," the sensor operator called out. 20-second window initiated. "Take us in," Mara commanded. "Maximum thrust." The shuttle surged forward, engines screaming as they pushed to full power. Around them, the battle continued to rage, energy beams and missile contrails crisscrossing the void as human and Zelthian forces clashed in desperate combat. They slipped through the shield gap with seconds to spare, the shuttle's hull scraping against the re-establishing energy field in a shower of sparks. Before them loomed the organic surface of the Zelthian flagship, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to ripple with alarm. "They've detected the breach," Voss observed. "Security protocols will be activating." "Proceed to designated landing point," Mara ordered. "Prepare for immediate deployment upon docking." The shuttle maneuvered to a maintenance access port, one of the few external openings on a Zelthian vessel that wasn't continuously monitored. Using specialized equipment, they forced the organic portal to dilate, creating just enough space for the team to enter in single file. "Remember," Mara briefed as they prepared to disembark, "Zelthian internal defenses will be on high alert. The ship itself will be fighting us, constricting corridors, altering atmospheric composition, potentially even growing specialized defense mechanisms. Move quickly, stay together, and maintain calm discipline." The Special Operations Team nodded in unison, their expressions hidden behind tactical masks designed to filter Zelthian biochemical defenses. Commander Voss checked the secure container, holding the bioweapon one final time. "Weapon status green," she confirmed. "Ready for deployment." Mara nodded, drawing her pulse rifle. "I'll take point. Commander Voss, you're on the weapon. The rest of you, defensive formation. Let's move." They entered the Zelthian vessel through the dilated maintenance port, emerging into a pulsing organic corridor that seemed to constrict slightly at their intrusion. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, and the ambient light pulsed in patterns that made human eyes strain to adjust. "Neural hub is 17 levels up," Mara informed them, consulting her tactical display. "Standard lift systems will be locked down under security protocols. We'll need to use the maintenance shafts." They moved through the ship with practiced precision, encountering surprisingly little resistance in the initial stages. The battle outside was drawing most of the Zelthian crew to their combat stations, leaving the internal corridors relatively undefended. "This feels too easy," Voss muttered, as they reached the first maintenance shaft. "The real defense is the ship itself," Mara replied, pointing to the walls around them, which had begun to secrete a viscous fluid that made the floor increasingly slippery. "It's already adapting to our presence. Stay alert." They ascended through the shaft, a grotesque, pulsing tube of muscular tissue that provided handholds that formed and dissolved as needed. By the time they reached the 10th level, the ship's response had intensified. Membranes formed across their path, requiring them to cut through with specialized blades. The air grew progressively thinner, forcing them to activate their supplemental oxygen supplies. It was at the 14th level that they encountered the first Zelthian defenders, a squad of warrior-caste guards who emerged from a side corridor, their particle lances already charging. "Contact front!" called one of the Special Operations team, dropping to a defensive position. The corridor erupted in chaos as both sides exchanged fire, The human pulse rifles were devastating in the confined space, but the Zelthian warriors' natural armor allowed them to absorb punishing damage. Two of the Special Operations team went down in the initial exchange, their tactical suits smoking from direct hits. "Suppressive fire," Mara ordered, flanking to the right to get a clear shot at the lead Zelthian. The remaining team members laid down a withering barrage, forcing the Zelthians to seek cover. Mara's shot caught the lead warrior in what passed for its throat, dropping it in a spray of bioluminescent ichor. "Push forward," Voss commanded, her integrated weapon systems unleashing a specialized ammunition designed to penetrate Zelthian exoskeletons. They fought their way through, suffering another casualty in the process. By the time they reached the final maintenance shaft that would take them to the neural hub level, only Mara, Voss, and two Special Operations soldiers remained. "Status of the weapon?" Mara asked, as they paused to regroup. Voss checked the container. "Still secure, no damage." "We're 3 minutes behind schedule," one of the soldiers reported, checking his tactical display. "Ship defenses are intensifying." Mara nodded grimly. "Then we move faster. The neural hub is approximately 200 meters from our position once we reach the next level. Expect heavy resistance. They'll have figured out our objective by now." The final ascent was grueling. The ship had fully activated its biological defense systems, with the very walls attempting to ensnare them with tentacle-like growths that reached for their limbs and equipment. The air had become saturated with spores that their masks barely filtered, leaving them coughing and disoriented despite the protection. When they finally emerged onto the hub level, they were met with the imposing form of Sub-Commander Vextier himself, flanked by a full squad of Royal Guards. "Captain Lin," the Zelthian officer rasped in halting English, his mandibles clicking in what intelligence had identified as amusement. "We meet again. Your persistence is notable." Mara raised her rifle. "Stand aside, Sub-Commander. This doesn't have to end in more bloodshed." Vexter's compound eyes glittered. "But it will. You have brought something onto our vessel, something that reeks of biological manipulation. We can sense it." "Last chance," Mara warned, signaling to Voss and the remaining team members to prepare for action. The Zelthian's mandibles spread wide in what might have been a smile. "No, human. It is your last chance. Surrender now, and your death will be quick. Continue, and we will ensure your suffering transcends mere physical pain." Mara's answer came in the form of a precisely aimed shot that caught Vextier in his armored shoulder, spinning him backward. The corridor erupted into a firestorm as both sides unleashed everything they had. One of the remaining Special Operations soldiers fell immediately, cut down by multiple particle beams. Voss took cover behind a pulsing organic column, returning fire with mechanical precision, her cybernetic eye allowing her to target weak points in the Zelthian's natural armor. Mara rolled to the side, avoiding a barrage that scorched the wall behind her. She came up firing, her pulse rifle set to maximum dispersion to compensate for the Zelthians' superior numbers. 2 Royal Guards fell, their exoskeletons shattered by the concentrated energy burst. "The weapon!" she called to Voss. "Get it to the hub! I'll cover you!" Voss hesitated only momentarily before nodding. Clutching the container to her chest, she began moving laterally along the corridor wall, using the confusion of the firefight as cover. Mara provided the distraction she needed, charging directly toward Vextier and his remaining guards. It was a suicidal move, but it drew their attention away from Voss's flanking maneuver. A particle beam grazed Mara's arm, burning through her tactical suit and searing the flesh beneath. But she pressed on, emptying her rifle's power cell into the Zelthian formation. Vexter himself moved to intercept her, his massive form surprisingly agile as he closed the distance. Mara's rifle clicked empty just as he reached her. She dropped the weapon and drew her combat knife in one fluid motion, ducking under his first swing and slashing at the joint, where his upper right limb met his thorax. The blade, designed specifically to penetrate Zelthian chitin, sank deep. Vexatir shrieked in a frequency that made Mara's ears ring, despite her protective gear. He lashed out with his remaining limbs, catching her across the chest and sending her sprawling. "Your species lacks the wisdom to see the inevitable," Vexatir hissed, advancing on her fallen form. "You fight against the natural order. The strong consume the weak. This is the way of all life." Mara struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain that lanced through her ribs. At least one broken. Possibly more. "We make our own order," she spat back, blood flecking her lips. "That's what your kind never understood about humans." Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Voss reach the neural hub entrance, the last royal guard falling to her precisely aimed shots. The Special Operations Commander paused at the threshold, looking back toward Mara with a question in her stance. Mara gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Go." As Voss disappeared into the neural hub with the bioweapon, Mara launched herself at Vexatir one final time. She knew she couldn't defeat him in direct combat, not in her injured state against his superior strength. But she didn't need to win. She just needed to buy time. Their clash was brutal and brief. Mara managed to drive her knife into another joint, eliciting another shriek of pain. But Vexatir caught her with a powerful blow that sent her crashing against the corridor wall. Stars exploded across her vision as her head impacted the unyielding surface. Through blurred sight, she saw Vexatir turn toward the neural hub entrance, suddenly realizing the true threat. He moved with surprising speed for his injured state, mandibles spread wide in what might have been the Zelthian equivalent of a battle cry. Mara forced herself to her knees, then to her feet, using the wall for support. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, obscuring her vision. With trembling hands, she drew her sidearm, the backup pulse pistol she always carried. "Hey!" she called out, her voice raw. "We're not finished." Vexatir paused at the hub entrance, turning back toward her with what might have been surprise or respect in his alien stance. Mara raised the pistol, steadying it with both hands to compensate for her injuries. "You chose war with humanity," she said softly. "Good luck surviving." She fired 3 times in rapid succession. The first shot missed entirely, her wounded state affecting her aim. The second caught Vexatir in one of his secondary limbs. But the third struck true, penetrating directly through one of his compound eyes and into the neural tissue beyond. The Zelthian subcommander collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs and leaking ichor, his death throes sending spasms through his massive form. Mara staggered toward the neural hub entrance, each step a fresh agony. Inside, she found Voss already at the central coral-like structure, the bioweapon container open beside her as she prepared the deployment mechanism. "Status?" Mara gasped, leaning heavily against the entrance. "Final calibration in progress," Voss reported without looking up. 30 seconds to deployment." Mara limped closer, observing the pulsing coral formation that housed the Zelthian ship's primary neural functions. It was beautiful in its alien way, complex patterns of bioluminescence flowing through translucent tissues, carrying commands and data throughout the massive vessel. And they were about to poison it all. "Captain," Voss said suddenly, her voice low, "there's something you should know. High Command's orders to me included a secondary protocol. After deployment, I am to ensure the neutralization mechanism is destroyed." Mara froze. "What?" "They want maximum spread," Voss continued, her hands still working on the deployment mechanism. "Not just this ship, the entire Zelthian fleet, possibly beyond." The implications struck Mara like a physical blow. This wasn't just about winning a battle or even a war. This was about ensuring the Zelthians could never threaten humanity again, by any means necessary. "That wasn't the agreement," Mara said carefully. "Dr. Cole's weapon includes safeguards specifically to prevent uncontrolled spread." "Safeguards that High Command has deemed unnecessary." Voss finally looked up, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Mara's face. "I have my orders, Captain." Orders that constitute genocide, Mara countered. We're soldiers, Commander, not exterminators. Voss's expression hardened. These creatures would show us no such mercy. They've already demonstrated their willingness to target our civilian populations. And that justifies becoming like them? Mara challenged. Where does it end? It ends with humanity's survival assured, Voss replied, turning back to the deployment mechanism. 15 seconds to activation. Mara made her decision in that crystalline moment of clarity that sometimes comes in the midst of chaos. She raised her pulse pistol once more, aiming it steadily at Voss's head. Step away from the device, Commander! Voss froze, then slowly turned to face her. You would side with the enemy over your own kind? I'm siding with the humanity I swore to protect, Mara replied. Not just their lives, but what makes those lives worth preserving. Our principles, our ethics, the ideals that separate us from mindless predators. Pretty words, Voss scoffed. Cold comfort for the colonists who will die if we show weakness now. This isn't weakness, Mara insisted. It's strength. The strength to win without becoming monsters ourselves. For a long moment, they stood in tableau, Mara with her weapon trained on Voss. Voss with her hand poised over the activation control. Around them, the neural hub pulsed with alien life, unaware of the human drama unfolding within its midst. Then, Voss smiled thinly. You're too late anyway. Her finger descended on the control. Mara fired, but the shot went wide as the ship suddenly lurched violently, the battle outside finally reaching critical intensity. The bioweapon activated with a soft hiss, releasing its deadly payload into the neural hub's circulatory system. It's done, Voss announced, a note of triumph in her voice. Now for the neutralization mechanism. She reached for the secondary component of the weapon, the failsafe Dr. Cole had installed. But Mara was already moving, ignoring the pain that threatened to overwhelm her. She tackled Voss away from the device, both of them crashing to the floor of the hub in a tangle of limbs. The fight was brutal and desperate. Voss was a trained special operations commander, her cybernetic enhancements giving her advantages in strength and reaction time. But Mara fought with the ferocity of absolute conviction, knowing that millions of lives, human and Zelthian alike, hung in the balance. They rolled across the floor of the neural hub, trading blows as the ship around them began to shudder and convulse, the first signs of the bioweapon taking effect. Overhead, the luminescent patterns in the coral structure began to flicker and dim as the engineered microbes attacked the organic components of the ship's neural pathways. Voss caught Mara with a cybernetically enhanced blow that sent her sprawling, stars once again exploding across her vision. The Special Operations Commander rose to her feet, moving purposefully toward the neutralization mechanism. You don't understand what's at stake, Voss said, drawing a combat knife from her belt. This is bigger than one ship or one battle. This is about ensuring humanity's future for generations to come. Mara struggled to her knees, blood dripping from a fresh cut on her cheek. And what kind of future will that be? She gasped. Built on genocide? On the deliberate extinction of another sentient species? That's not humanity's future. That's humanity's doom. Voss paused, knife in hand. You're naive, Captain. The universe doesn't reward mercy. It rewards strength, power, the will to do whatever is necessary to survive. Then maybe we need to change the universe, Mara replied, forcing herself to her feet through sheer willpower. Starting here, starting now. Another violent tremor shook the ship, more severe than the last. The neural hub's pulsing had grown erratic, with entire sections going dark as the bioweapon spread through its systems. They were running out of time. Voss lunged forward suddenly, knife aimed at Mara's throat. Mara parried the blow with her forearm, crying out as the blade sliced through her tactical suit and into the flesh beneath. But the move brought her inside Voss's guard. She drove her knee up into the commander's midsection, following with an elbow strike to the temple that sent Voss staggering. Before Voss could recover, Mara closed the distance to the neutralization mechanism. Her fingers scrambled for the activation sequence Dr. Cole had taught her during their secure communication. "No!" Voss shouted, launching herself at Mara's back. They crashed into the coral structure, the impact sending waves of pain through Mara's already battered body. Voss's knife flashed again, catching Mara across the shoulder in a searing line of fire. But Mara had come too far to fail now. With a desperate surge of strength, she drove her elbow backward, catching Voss in her cybernetic eye. The impact damaged the delicate mechanisms, causing the commander to cry out and recoil. That moment was all Mara needed. She lunged for the neutralization device, fingers flying across its interface in the precise sequence Dr. Cole had specified. "Activation code accepted," announced the device's synthetic voice. "Neutralization protocol initiating." "What have you done?" Voss demanded, clutching her damaged eye implant. "Saved us all," Mara replied, slumping against the coral structure as exhaustion and pain threatened to overwhelm her. "The bioweapon will disable this ship as intended, but it won't spread beyond these bulkheads. The war continues, but with conventional weapons, not with plague." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Warning patterns flashed through the remaining active sections of the neural hub. "We need to evacuate," Mara realized. "The ship's primary systems are failing. Life support will be next." Voss glared at her with her one functioning eye. "You've jeopardized the entire mission. High Command will have you court-martialed for this." "Probably," Mara acknowledged. "But I can live with that." She straightened, pushing through the pain. "Now, are you coming, or would you prefer to go down with this ship?" For a moment, it seemed Voss might choose the latter option out of sheer spite. Then, practicality reasserted itself. "This isn't over, Captain." "No," Mara agreed, "but Phase 1 is let's go." Their exit from the failing Zelthian flagship was a nightmarish gauntlet of collapsing corridors and desperate Zelthian crew members. The ship's organic components were dying rapidly, sections sealing themselves off in a futile attempt to contain the contagion. Twice they were forced to find alternative routes, as the path back to their shuttle was blocked by emergency bulkheads. By the time they reached the shuttle's location, the inexorable shadow was in its death throes. Entire sections had gone dark, and the rhythmic pulsing that signified the ship's heartbeat had become erratic and feeble. "The shuttle's gone," Voss observed as they reached the maintenance port where they had docked. "Either destroyed in the battle or one of your team took it." Mara scanned the area, mind racing through alternatives. "Emergency escape pods. Zelthian dreadnoughts have them for non-warrior castes. 2 levels down, port quadrant." They made their way through increasingly unstable corridors, the ship's death affecting its structural integrity. When they finally reached the escape pod bay, they found it in chaos, Zelthian workers and support castes crowding the available pods, mandibles clicking in panic as they sought to flee the dying vessel. "They won't let us near those pods," Voss observed grimly, checking her weapons charge. "Not without a fight." Mara surveyed the scene, then pointed to a partially hidden access panel near the far wall. "Maintenance override. If their systems are similar to our preliminary intelligence, I might be able to release an unoccupied pod remotely." They worked their way around the perimeter of the bay, avoiding direct confrontation with the panicked Zelthians. When they reached the access panel, Mara pried it open to reveal an interface of pulsing organic tissue, interwoven with more conventional controls. "Cover me," she instructed Voss. Then began the delicate process of interfacing with the alien technology. After several tense minutes, during which Voss was forced to deter an approaching Zelthian worker with a warning shot, Mara succeeded in isolating an unoccupied pod and triggering its release protocol. "There," she said, pointing to a small portal that had dilated open across the bay. "That's our ride out." They made their final sprint across the escape pod bay, drawing alarmed clicks and hisses from the Zelthians, but encountering no direct opposition. The aliens were too focused on their own survival to prevent the humans from leaving. The escape pod was designed for Zelthian physiology, with awkward seating and controls that required painful contortion for human use. But it was functional, and that was all that mattered. "Launch sequence initiated," Mara announced as she manipulated the unfamiliar controls. "Brace for ejection." The pod shot free from the dying dreadnought with bone-jarring force, its simple propulsion system carrying them away from the massive vessel just as secondary explosions began to ripple along its hull. Through the pod's viewing port, they watched as the inexorable Shadow, pride of the Zelthian fleet and flagship of warlord Zellar's conquest, began to break apart. Not in the catastrophic explosion of a human vessel's reactor breach, but in the slower, almost mournful disintegration of a living thing succumbing to disease. Sections peeled away like decaying flesh, the bioluminescent patterns flickering and dying across its vast surface. "It worked," Voss observed, a complex mixture of emotions in her voice: triumph, regret, and something harder to define. "The primary objective is achieved." "Yes," Mara agreed quietly, "and only the primary objective." Around the dying flagship, the battle for Nova Prime continued to rage, but already, the tactical situation was shifting. Without the coordination provided by the inexorable Shadow, the Zelthian fleet's formations had begun to fragment. Human forces, sensing the advantage, pressed forward with renewed vigor. "Emergency transponder activated," Mara reported, setting the pod's limited communications array to broadcast on human frequencies. "Now, we wait for pickup." As they drifted through the chaos of the battle, watching human and Zelthian vessels clash in deadly ballet against the backdrop of Nova Prime's serene blue sphere, Mara found herself reflecting on the choice she had made. She had followed orders, but not blindly. She had protected humanity, but not at the cost of its soul. The war would continue, perhaps for years to come, but it would be fought with ships and soldiers, not with plagues that threatened extinction. Whether history would judge her kindly for that decision remained to be seen. But for now, watching the stars through the pod's viewport, she found a measure of peace in knowing she had stayed true to the principles that made humanity worth defending in the first place. When the UES Vanguard finally retrieved their escape pod 3 hours later, the tide of the battle had turned decisively. The Zelthian fleet, bereft of its flagship and command structure, had begun a disorganized retreat from the Nova Prime system. Admiral Chen's forces were in pursuit, pressing the advantage while being careful not to overextend. Mara was taken directly to the Vanguard's medical bay, her injuries more severe than she had allowed herself to acknowledge during the mission. As the medical staff worked to stabilize her condition, Exo Moreno appeared at her bedside, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "The neutralization protocol?" she asked immediately, her voice weak from exhaustion and pain. "Activated and functioning as designed," Moreno confirmed. "Dr. Cole confirms the contagion has been contained to the inexorable Shadow. No spread detected to other Zelthian vessels." Mara closed her eyes briefly in relief. "And Commander Voss?" "In custody," Moreno replied. "She's already filed a formal report to High Command regarding your modification of the mission parameters." "Of course she has," Mara said with a humorless smile. "What's the word from Admiral Chen?" Moreno's expression grew more serious. "The Admiral has ordered your immediate removal from command pending investigation. I've been appointed acting captain of the Vanguard." "A court-martial is coming," Mara observed, not particularly surprised. "I expected as much." "Captain, Mara," Moreno said, leaning closer. "What you did out there, many of us understand it, support it, even. The crew is behind you." "Thank you, Jax," she replied, genuinely touched. "But this isn't about popularity. It's about principles. I made my choice knowing the consequences." "Still," Moreno insisted, You should know that Dr. Cole has already prepared a detailed report on the potential catastrophic outcomes had the neutralization protocol not been activated. And Ambassador Ives has been making discreet inquiries about legal representation for your eventual hearing. Mara raised an eyebrow. Ives? I thought she'd wash her hands of the entire operation. Apparently, she appreciates the distinction between following orders and following them blindly. Moreno replied with a slight smile. As do I. Before their conversation could continue, the medical bay doors slid open to admit a grim-faced security detail led by Admiral Chen herself. Captain Mara Lin, the Admiral announced formally. By authority of High Command, you are hereby relieved of duty and placed under arrest for insubordination, sabotage of a military operation, and providing aid to the enemy. The enemy being an entire sentient species you were prepared to exterminate. Mara observed coolly. Chen's expression remained impassive. Your personal moral qualms do not override direct orders in wartime. Captain, the decision was not yours to make. Every decision is mine to make, Mara countered, forcing herself to sit upright despite the pain it caused. That's what it means to be human, to have agency, to choose. Even when the choices are impossible. Save your philosophy for the tribunal, Chen replied dismissively. You'll have ample opportunity to explain your actions there. As the security detail moved to secure her, Mara met Moreno's gaze one last time. In his eyes, she saw not judgment, but understanding. Perhaps even admiration. Whatever came next, she would face it, knowing she had remained true to herself and to the principles that defined humanity at its best. 3 months later, in the austere chamber of the military tribunal on Earth, Mara stood at attention as the panel of senior officers prepared to deliver their verdict. The trial had been lengthy and contentious, with testimony from Dr. Cole, Ambassador Ives, Commander Moreno, and others who had been involved in the Nova Prime operation. Public opinion had been sharply divided. Many viewed her as a traitor who had jeopardized humanity's strategic advantage in a desperate war. Others saw her as a moral compass who had prevented humanity from crossing an ethical line from which there would be no return. The head of the tribunal, Admiral Harrison, cleared his throat. Captain Mara Lin, this court has considered the evidence and testimony presented in your case. The charges against you are serious and would normally merit the most severe penalties under military law. Mara maintained her composure, back straight, eyes forward. However, Harrison continued, this court cannot ignore the context of your actions. Dr. Cole's testimony regarding the potential uncontrolled spread of the bioweapon, coupled with Ambassador Ives's presentation on the diplomatic and ethical implications of biological warfare, have given us pause. A murmur ran through the assembled observers. Furthermore, Harrison added, recent developments in the conflict must be considered. The targeted strike against the Zelthian flagship, without resort to indiscriminate biological weapons, has led to the first meaningful peace overtures from moderate factions within the Zelthian Empire. Ambassador Ives reports that preliminary negotiations have begun, with the Zelthian Council of Elders apparently chastened by their military losses and perhaps impressed by humanity's restraint. Mara blinked in surprise. This was news to her, isolated as she had been during the proceedings. Nevertheless, Harrison continued, his tone hardening. Military discipline requires that direct insubordination face consequences. Therefore, it is the finding of this tribunal that while your actions may have been morally justified, they represent a clear violation of the chain of command that cannot be overlooked. He paused, scanning the document before him. Captain Mara Lin, you are hereby demoted to the rank of commander and relieved of command of the U.S. Vanguard. You will serve as strategic advisor to the newly formed Zelthian Diplomatic Initiative under Ambassador Ives, where your first-hand knowledge of Zelthian culture and military capabilities may prove valuable in securing a lasting peace. The sentence was simultaneously a punishment and a reprieve, a recognition that while military discipline had to be maintained, her actions had merit that could not be dismissed entirely. As the tribunal adjourned, Mara found Ambassador Ives waiting for her outside the chamber. "Not exactly what you expected?" the older woman asked, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Not exactly," Mara agreed. "Strategic advisor to the diplomatic initiative. You're doing, I assume." "I may have suggested that your particular insights would be wasted in a military prison," Ives acknowledged. "Besides, the Zelthians have specifically asked about you." "Me?" Mara asked, genuinely surprised. "Why?" "It seems your actions aboard the inexorable Shadow made quite an impression," Ives explained as they walked. "According to our intelligence, surviving crew members reported that you had the opportunity to unleash a devastating bioweapon without limitation, but chose a more targeted approach. In a culture that values strength above all else, they find this intriguing." "Intriguing enough for peace talks?" "That, combined with their military losses." "Yes," Ives confirmed. "The moderate factions within their Council of Elders have gained influence since Warlord Zellar's death in the battle. They're proposing a demilitarized zone along the border regions and normalized trade relations." Mara absorbed this information thoughtfully. "And High Command? Are they genuinely interested in peace, or just regrouping for the next offensive?" "Let's just say opinions are divided," Ives replied diplomatically. "Which is why I need someone like you on my team, someone who understands both the military and ethical dimensions of this conflict." They stepped outside the tribunal building into the warm sunshine of a San Francisco afternoon. In the distance, the partially rebuilt Golden Gate Bridge stood as a testament to humanity's resilience in the face of earlier conflicts. Now, perhaps, they stood at the threshold of a new chapter, not just survival, but coexistence. "You know," Mara said reflectively, "when this all began, when Warlord Zellar issued his ultimatum, I told him something that stayed with me throughout this ordeal." "What was that?" Ives asked. "You chose war with humanity. Good luck surviving," Mara recalled. "At the time, I meant it as a threat, a promise that we wouldn't go down without a fight. But now I wonder if there's another interpretation." "Oh?" "Maybe survival isn't just about winning the war," Mara suggested. "Maybe it's about finding a way to end it without losing what makes us human in the first place. Our compassion, our ethics, our ability to see beyond immediate victory to a future worth building." Ives nodded thoughtfully. "A future that might include peaceful coexistence with the very species we nearly exterminated. Ironic, isn't it?" "Life often is," Mara agreed. "So, when do we start?" "We already have," Ives replied, gesturing to a waiting diplomatic shuttle. "The Zelthian delegation arrives tomorrow. I hope you're ready to face some familiar mandibles across the negotiating table." As they boarded the shuttle, Mara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From starship captain to nearly court-martialed to diplomat, not the career path she had envisioned. But then, the most important journeys rarely followed expected routes. The war with the Zelthians had cost humanity dearly, in lives, in resources, in innocence. Yet, perhaps from that crucible of conflict, something valuable had emerged, a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to be human in a universe filled with difference and danger. Not merely to survive, but to survive with soul intact. Not just to win, but to win in ways that allowed for reconciliation rather than extinction. As Earth receded behind them, Mara looked toward the stars with new perspective. The message she had delivered to Warlord Zellar now seemed to apply equally to both species. You chose war with humanity. Good luck surviving. And perhaps, against all odds, both humanity and the Zelthians would indeed survive, not in endless conflict, but in the hard-won wisdom that came from glimpsing the abyss of mutual destruction and collectively stepping back from its edge. The universe, it seemed, still had surprises in store, and Mara Lynn intended to face them with the same principles that had guided her through the darkest moments of the war: courage, compassion, and the unwavering belief that even in the midst of conflict, humanity's greatest strength lay not in its capacity for destruction, but in its capacity for choice.